we need more Bonhoeffers, meaning we need more people who think and work the way Bonhoeffer worked, is writing on religionless Christianity.
Welcome back to part 2 with Dr. Prevette. In our last episode, we asked the question, have we lost the ability to be genuine? Today, we explore the historical figure that inspired this conversation, Bonhoeffer.
All right, welcome back to the Endeavor series part 2, where we met with Dr. Prevette talking about his story pre-Christ, post-Christ, and then also talking about the life and I guess you could call it a legacy of the history of Bonhoeffer, living in World War II, experiencing Nazis, Hitler, trying to figure out what is the church's role in that time. If you are interested in first, before you watch this video, make sure to watch part 1 before you watch part 2 to get some background on that. And we're going to just continue. We talked a lot about Bonhoeffer. Would you say that this is a historical figure or something that you maybe relate to or inspired by? I know I'm very inspired by Bonhoeffer. The Bonhoeffer film actually had just come out at the end of 2024.
That's right.
I believe, was it Angel Studios that produced it or came out with it? And this was, or is a man who lived through World War II and was, as they title it, pastor, spy, assassin, someone who felt convicted to not just preach about the gospel, but actually be the gospel. Can we talk a little bit about Bonhoeffer?
Yeah, Dietrich Bonhoeffer. That's the reason I'm talking to you today is I met your father. And one of the first things I say when I start a graduate class, I say, we need more Bonhoeffers, meaning we need more people who think and work the way Bonhoeffer worked. Bonhoeffer's life is very complex, and to try to put it into a 2-hour movie, first thing I'll tell you is you cannot get his life in a 2-hour movie.
It was rough.
I listened to, and we can post there's a 10-hour podcast that I've listened to, and listened to some of those episodes twice, but I've studied a lot of Bonhoeffer's life. But in short, the man grew up with a lot of privilege. He was a brilliant, brilliant young man. He earned his doctorate when he was 20 years old at a German, not a seminary, a university in theology. And then he came to America and he was exposed to churches in Harlem, New York. He attended Union Seminary, and he had the potential, if he had lived his normal life, he would have been a very significant figure in 20th century theology as an academic. But the rise of Nazi socialism and the rise of Hitler in the early 30s was so troubling to him that he returned to his own country and he began to challenge the German church. Now, the German church is Lutheran, it's Christian, but it's going along with Nazi socialism.
Right.
National socialism is, in his view, a cancer, and it will infect and kill the church. So he is a insider. He's German. And he is known for this famous speech, the false Fuhrer. Well, can you imagine calling Hitler the false Fuhrer in 1933 as he was rising to power?
And what does that phrase mean?
The false leader. Führer is leader.
In German.
Yeah, and so everyone saw Hitler as the answer to their prayers.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of parallels to what's going on in America with nationalism and our clamoring after, give us a leader who can sort this out. But Bonhoeffer's life is either if you just look at a movie or you get into it and study it and get deep in the weeds. He is a complex figure. So he forms a seminary, underground seminary, and they have maybe 20, 30 people studying with him in secret because the Gestapo is now starting to shut down anything that the German church is more or less going along with Nazi socialism, National Socialism. And so Finkenwalde is where he writes the book, Life Together. So a lot of people know Bonhoeffer, if we're Christian people, we've read Life Together. And then the second book is so well known, it's about the cost of discipleship. These are the 2 books people know.
Yeah.
Radical stuff. And I mean, your generation should at least read some of this. You will be challenged just with your basic thinking. But then his life, I mean, this is where it gets really profound. He's imprisoned. He does take part in the Abwehr, which is the German resistance to this was the German army. And people recognize that Germany is committing nation side. It is destroying itself. And he gets caught up in a plot, but he is not a main player in that plot. He is one of hundreds. And he's in prison, but not so much for his plotting against the Fuhrer, but because he dodged the draft. And he spends 2 years in prison, and he writes letters and papers in prison. Now, this is where anybody reads this stuff, you're gonna really encounter a different Bonhoeffer. And one of the things I am very drawn to is his writing on religionless Christianity.
Yeah.
And this means that we have bought into a religion. We have bought into a way, a formalization, a way of being Christian. And he says, are we any use if we follow this path? And then he's hung and killed at the very end of the war. He's killed like a month before the war ends.
Yeah.
Because then they start to link him to the plot to assassinate the Fuhrer. And they kill all sorts of people.
And the Fuhrer is, for those that are listening, is Hitler at that time. Hitler is the one that is in control, and there's this assassination attempt.
There's 3 attempts against Hitler.
Yeah.
But this last one, and it's in the movie Valkyrie. I think a lot of what I've found talking to people who are younger is they don't read deeply. Sorry, they don't. So I'll say, have you seen this movie? And I'll recommend movies they can look at. So they can look at Valkyrie, which is about Tom Cruise. I mean, he plays the part. But it was a German general that had a plot. They put a bomb under a table. It went off. It would have killed him, but there was a big, thick table leg. So, but he moved the briefcase, and he wasn't killed. But that set the German machine on high alert to get rid of anybody and everybody who was plotting against Hitler. And there were a lot of people. The point for us as Christians is to take away what does it mean to be a Christian in the 21st century. As we follow Christ, we have got to be a little bit more critical about some of these structures and means that we're buying into. I, as a returnee, am really concerned about the current rush to elevate a leader, elevate a party, and think that party can sort out the great giant social evils of our time. That is, you cannot legislate morality. Morality is brought about through the stuff we've been talking about. Deep personal change, dignity, worth, value. So we are now facing your generation. I'm going to be off the scene here.
Okay.
You know, hopefully I got a few more years, but in the next 20 years, I don't know if the American experiment is going to survive. I doubt it, the way it's going.
And whether that's presidential or whether that's just even like an idol. I mean, I feel like we can easily put.
You don't need a president. Look at your trust in your economic system, which is completely rotten.
We put a lot of trust. Yeah.
I should say our economic system. My wife hates it when I say your, but the American economic system is totally built on corruption and greed. And we're going to be like Venezuela and Colombia and other countries that have imploded because we are happily spending ourselves to death. Ask an audience like yours, what does it mean to live simply? How do you simply live that others can live simply and just have enough food and water and basics? And I see that emerging now with certainly the millennial generation. My son is he's in Hollywood. There are a lot of millennials who want to talk about social justice. They just don't know what they mean by it. It's a term that everybody throws around.
Yeah.
But there needs to be much more conversations about, is this what we want in life? I mean, you guys here in Orange County, is this it? Is this what you want? This is a mirage. This is a giant joke. Nobody here is really thriving. They're all on a wheel that's turning 1,000 miles an hour. So it's not original with me. I listened to enough people in my lifetime who have helped me understand you got to get past the illusion and find what's deeply, deeply true.
Right. And that's our relationship and our purpose with Christ.
And with others.
Yeah.
Don't forget, you see Christ in the face of the other.
Yes.
So how you relate to other people, when you drive past this guy standing on the street today, how do you see Christ in him? How do you see Christ in the face of all the others?
Yeah.
And that's a big missing component with particularly kids that come up in evangelical churches. They're so fed this diet of you got to love Jesus, but you don't love Jesus any more than you love the most unfriendly, unlovely, rotten person you've ever met.
Yeah.
And so the litmus test is, how do you love the person that just, knocked you around or took advantage of you?
Yeah. When I watched, because I watched the Bonhoeffer film, and I know that my dad has a couple of books that I've been able to go over. But I don't know if this was just in the film, Hollywood kind of inserting things here, or if this was something that Bonhoeffer was kind of facing. But something that I noticed in the film was that a lot of his conversations with his fellow pastors were like, well, aren't we supposed to love our enemy? Right. And but he's like, yes, but what is God going to forgive us if we don't try to stop this man? Basically, try to stop Hitler.
This is the Hollywood jump.
Okay.
He absolutely focused on, that was his beginning, was to look at this, because the German church was starting to buy into this rhetoric about the Jews, and that the Jews should just be gotten out of society. So that's where he began to really draw up his theological greatness began to emerge. And he said, they are human. We need to care for them. And that was so contrary to what the German church taught. And then what you'll do if you're a script writer, you got to compress things.
Right.
So they compress together some of those things. But yeah, there's snippets you'll get from watching a film that then you go look at what the guy actually wrote, and you talk to people, because people have spent a lot of energy and time studying Bonhoeffer. He's so influential. But yes, to both of those, but probably not the way they portray it in the film, because they're compressing things.
Yeah.
And they're compressing very complex things. That's the problem with movie making. When we do this podcast, we're compressing some things we want to say in a few minutes, but there's so much more energy and time that's needed to unpack it.
I encourage everybody to take a class at Vanguard with Dr. Prevette. You will learn so much.
Well, I think class, you just, there's plenty of good resources online. I am one of many people who wants to just encourage you to find your way into this kind of material. And, don't spend all your time on Instagram, for God's sakes.
Well, I do have a question from one of our viewers just about the idea of Bonhoeffer and preaching versus being the gospel. So one of our questions is, and I think we kind of answered this already, is preaching the gospel not enough? What else are we called to do, or how can I do that in my community?
We have this role of, this is very unique to American Christianity, that we think that preaching is the primary thing. So you got to preach and proclaim Christ. And this is often said, words without deeds are useless, and deeds without words are useless. So they go together. But to preach the gospel, what do you mean by that? That's the first thing I asked. Does that mean to stand on a podium somewhere and yell at people or talk to people? Or does it mean to do what, say, Mother Teresa did? Care for the dead and dying every day of your life, and wash people who have leprosy.
Yeah.
Or Emma Thomasek, who did the very same thing up in North India, a person hardly anybody's ever heard of, but she spent like 70 years helping kids. I mean, one of the first things I'll ask, like in a class on this topic, is just write for me a short paragraph about what you understand of word and deed. And if you're coming from a strong, quote, evangelical background, you have got a strong emphasis on the word. So you feel the proclamation of the word is real important. But to just proclaim without the actual deep change happening with the people what's happening to you and what's happening to the people listening to you, is the next question you have to ask yourself. So what? So what you preach? Then what? How does the actual sustainable change come?
Yeah.
And I'm not against preaching. I mean, there are some very gifted communicators who do preach well, and I think you do need to expose yourself to people who can think and articulate thought, but you also have to take it beyond that into, all right, what's the application? How do I start living this out? What was one thing I heard that I can really go and now really activate that into my life? And again, this is it's not simple, it's not easy. It just takes a lot of commitment. Following Christ means following a man who's going to die, right? So this is hard for you're a very young person, but you are going to die. And death, it will come to you, and die well when you die. So this is as old as humanity, you know, the great traditions of have you lived your life so that you can die a good death?
Yeah. The honor.
So I don't care much preaching about that. You know, that you live your life in such a way that when it ends, you really are able to say, my life made a difference. Not just to others, but to me and to God.
Yeah.
So
If you are interested in watching the Bonhoeffer film or learning more about Bonhoeffer, the 2024 Angel Studios produced film is available on Apple TV, Amazon Prime, or the Angel Studios link if you become a member. So those are some great ways to just, if you want to visually see the Bonhoeffer life, or if you are interested in learning more about the complexities of his life, there is a link that will be added to the caption below, which is
it's a 9-part series. Trip Fuller interviews a bunch of guys like me, Bonhoeffer scholars.
Yeah.
And they cover his entire life. And if you want to learn, like if you want to take a course, that's an online course. It's free. And they offered all the resources. There's talks, there's papers, but I listen to the podcast. So that's what I would recommend for the one that wants the deeper dive.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, all those links will be added to the caption to just go ahead and just go straight to watching or reading or listening. Amazing. Something that I thought that was interesting, actually a quote that Adolf Hitler said was, if we want to control the world, we need to control the youth. And that's so true, but of course had a perverted and twisted view on how to do that. What is something, Dr. Prevette, that you wish that you could tell my generation first, just in the idea of how do we reach our youth? What do we need?
It's a huge question. If you've asked me this, then I've thought a lot about it. I think my deepest hope and prayer for young people is they find people who are mentors, but that word gets kind of goofy as well.